The year was 1883, and the Arizona Territory lay sprawled beneath a sun that showed no mercy. The air shimmered above the sand like molten glass, the mountains cut the horizon into jagged blades, and the land, wild, aching, and alive, seemed to hum with secrets older than time itself. Into this vastness rode Clara Bennett, a woman out of place and out of patience with the polite boundaries of the East. Clara was 27 and already tired of being told what a woman could not do. In Boston, she had been praised for her delicate hand with a paintbrush and scolded for her fascination with the new invention called photography. Her father, a professor, said cameras were machines for men. Her mother, a lady of breeding, said the desert was no place for a Bennett. Clara disagreed with them both, and that's why she was here now, standing on the edge of the known world with a heavy wooden camera strapped to her mule and a determination that burned hotter than the sun overhead. She had come west to capture the truth, the kind that couldn't be softened by painters or rewritten by politicians. She wanted to photograph the people, not just the polished faces of city life. Word had reached her of the Apache tribe still living deep in the mountains, resisting the tide of settlers and soldiers that pressed closer every year. Most said they were savages. Clara had seen enough hypocrisy to question that word, so she packed her plates, lenses, and courage, boarded a train, and crossed 2,000 miles to find them. Her first taste of the frontier was not romantic. The wind carried grit that bit her skin raw, the nights were cold enough to freeze her breath, and the towns, ragged clusters of saloons, trading posts, and suspicion, welcomed her with the kind of stares that told her she didn't belong. Women did not travel alone. Women did not sleep under the open sky. Women certainly did not wander into Apache country with a camera the size of a child and an attitude sharper than a Bowie knife. But Clara had long ago learned that belonging was overrated. Freedom was what mattered. And freedom out here smelled like dust, danger, and the promise of discovery. Her guide, an old prospector named Jonah Pike, had tried to dissuade her more than once. "Ain't no pictures worth dying for, miss," he'd said that morning as they filled their canteens at a cracked watering hole. "The Apache don't take kindly to strangers. You point that contraption at them, they might point something sharper right back." Clara only smiled faintly. "Then I'll be sure to ask before I take their picture." Jonah had muttered something about Boston madness and trudged ahead, leading his mule with a kind of fatalistic resignation. He had seen many kinds of fools in his years, fortune hunters, drifters, soldiers chasing glory, but this slender woman with steel in her eyes was a new breed altogether. By afternoon, they reached the red cliffs of the San Pedro Valley. The land glowed as if lit from within, the rock faces painted in deep rust and gold. Clara stopped to set up her camera. She worked quickly but reverently, focusing the lens, tilting the glass, adjusting for the light. Each movement carried a quiet precision, a ritual of patience and defiance. When she lifted the black cloth over her head to peer through the viewfinder, she caught her breath. The image on the glass was small and inverted, but beautiful. The world, reversed and framed, seemed to whisper back to her, "See me as I am." It was in that moment, standing beneath the desert sun with her hands trembling and her heart full, that Clara felt she was on the edge of something vast, something that would change her life forever. She didn't yet know whose land she was trespassing on. She didn't yet know the eyes that would soon find her. But somewhere beyond those red cliffs, the Apache who ruled the land had already sensed her presence, and fate had begun to stir. By the time Clara and Jonah reached the trading post at San Miguel, the sun had sunk low enough to turn the world into molten copper. A dry wind rolled down from the cliffs, carrying the scent of mesquite and dust and whispers. Always whispers. The post was little more than a cluster of buildings, a saloon with cracked windows, a supply shack that doubled as a store, and a wooden stable that creaked like it resented every nail holding it together. Men lounged on the porch, their faces burned by sun and suspicion. Every head turned when Clara climbed down from her mule, camera case slung across her shoulder. Jonah spat in the dust and muttered, "Keep your head down, miss. These folks talk too much and trust too little." Inside, the air was thick with tobacco smoke and stale whiskey. The barkeep, a wiry man with a scar across his cheek, looked Clara up and down as if deciding whether she was real or just a story he'd tell later. She asked for water, polite but firm. He poured it without a word. his eyes flicking to her camera case as if it were a weapon. It was the rancher at the end of the counter who finally spoke. "You headed north, miss?" His tone was casual, but his gaze wasn't. "Ain't wise. That's Apache land." Clara took a slow sip of water. "So I've been told," he chuckled. "Then you've been told right. Folks who wander up that way don't tend to wander back." Jonah gave her a warning glance, but she asked anyway, "And what about the man they call the Desert Ghost?" The saloon fell silent. Even the barkeep's hand froze mid-polish. Then the rancher leaned back on his stool, his eyes narrowing. "You don't want to be asking about him." "Why not?" Clara asked. "Because he's real," another man said from a dark corner. He was old, his hair silver, his face leathered from years of sun and loss. "Name's Kohan, Apache chief, some say shaman. He moves like smoke and strikes like thunder. They say he can track a man by the sound of his heartbeat. Cavalry's been trying to catch him for years, never do. He ain't a man you find, he finds you." Laughter rippled through the room, but it wasn't the easy kind. It was nervous, brittle, the kind that pretended not to believe its own words. Jonah shook his head. "Told you, Miss Bennett. These people love their ghost stories." The old man's eyes didn't waver. "Not ghost stories, son. Warnings. That land don't belong to the white man, and it never will." Clara studied him. "You've seen him?" The old man hesitated, then nodded once. "Long ago. My brother was with the cavalry back when they tried to drive his people out. Kohan rode into camp at night, quiet as a shadow. Took the horses, left the soldiers walking and confused. Didn't kill a one of them. Just left a mark in the dirt, an eagle's feather and a line drawn through it. Said it meant, 'This land remembers.'" Something about the phrase struck Clara deep. "This land remembers." It was poetry and warning all at once. She thought of the way the canyon light had shifted that morning, the way the ground seemed alive beneath her boots. When she left the saloon, the sun was gone and the stars had begun their silent vigil overhead. Jonah was already packing their gear, muttering under his breath about stubborn women and cursed luck. But Clara barely heard him. The night air was cool against her face, and somewhere out in the darkness a coyote cried, a long, lonely sound that echoed across the valley. She looked north, toward the mountains that the locals feared to name aloud. There in the black distance she thought she saw something move, a flicker of motion against the ridge. Maybe it was just her imagination, or maybe it was the desert ghost himself watching the stranger who had dared to ask his name. Either way, Clara knew one thing. She was closer to the story she came for. And the story, it seemed, was already looking back at her. The third morning broke hard and bright, the kind of light that could peel the color from a man's eyes. The canyon trail curved ahead like a scar through the red rock, and Clara Bennett followed it with the stubborn resolve of someone who refused to listen to reason, or fear. Jonah Pike had given up trying to talk her out of it. "Suit yourself, miss," he'd said before dawn, rolling his bedroll and shaking his head. "You keep pushing north, you'll find more than pictures. You'll find ghosts." She smiled faintly, though her heart ached with nerves. "Maybe I already have." He'd left her with a canteen, a compass, and a muttered prayer. Now she was alone. The desert stretched in every direction, endless and echoing, the silence broken only by the wind. She had followed a narrow path up through the cliffs, her mule snorting under the weight of her camera gear. It was reckless, she knew it, but every instinct told her the light here, the way it burned across the rock, would make the kind of photograph that could speak for centuries. She stopped at a high ridge overlooking a basin, where the earth looked like an ocean frozen mid-wave. She set up her tripod, carefully adjusting the camera's brass fittings. When she ducked beneath the black cloth, the inverted world on the glass plate took her breath away. The red cliffs shimmered against the blue sky, and for a fleeting second, she felt she was touching something holy. Then the air changed. It was subtle at first, the hairs rising on her arms, the mule shifting uneasily, ears twitching toward the canyon rim. Clara froze, her hand on the lens. The silence deepened until even the wind seemed to hold its breath. She straightened slowly, scanning the cliffs. Nothing moved. But her gut told her she was being watched. And then she saw him. A figure stood on the ridge opposite her, motionless as carved stone. The sun caught the edges of his dark hair, his bare chest marked with the faint lines of paint. An eagle feather trailed from his braid. Even from a distance there was something commanding, something that made the world narrow to the space between them. Clara's heart stuttered. She knew instantly who he was, Kohan, the desert ghost. Another shape appeared behind him. Then another. Apache warriors, silent as the rocks themselves, stepped into view, bows drawn, eyes sharp with suspicion. They surrounded her in a half-circle before she could even reach for her camera. Her mule brayed and stamped the ground, nervous. Clara raised her hand slowly. "I mean no harm," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I'm only taking photographs." No one answered. The leader, Kohan, moved closer, descending the slope with the measured grace of a predator. The sunlight caught the metal of a knife at his belt, the glint of amber in his eyes. When he stopped a few feet away, Clara felt the air between them tighten like a drawn bowstring. He spoke in English, the words low but precise. "This is sacred land. You do not belong here." "I didn't know," she said, meeting his gaze. "I'm sorry. I was only—" He gestured sharply, cutting her off. "You point that machine at my people?" "It's a camera," she said. "It captures light, not lives." Kohan's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Curiosity, perhaps, or disbelief. He stepped closer, studying her face as though searching for deceit. Clara held his gaze, refusing to look away. For a long moment, neither moved. The wind stirred the dust between them, swirling around their boots like a living thing. Then, unexpectedly, he said, "You have courage." It wasn't praise. It was observation, a truth stated like fact. Clara's lips parted, but no words came. The moment stretched, electric and fragile. Finally, he turned to his men and spoke in Apache. One of them retrieved her camera and handed it to him. Kohan studied the heavy box, turning it over in his hands, frowning at the glass and brass fittings. Then he looked back at her. "You will come with us," he said. "You will explain." "Explain?" she repeated, pulse racing. He nodded once. "If you lie, the earth will remember." Before she could protest, two warriors took her by the arms, not roughly, but firmly. Kohan gave a single command, and they began leading her down the canyon trail. Clara glanced back only once. The wind swept across the ridge where she'd stood, erasing her footprints in the sand. Whatever she'd come to find, she had found it. And it had found her first. The journey into the canyon was a descent into another world. The sun slipped lower as the Apache warriors led Clara through the twisting red rock paths, her camera gear carried by one of the men, her mule trailing behind under guard. The deeper they went, the quieter it became, as though even the wind dared not disturb the silence here. The cliffs rose around them like the walls of an ancient cathedral, vast, solemn, alive with the weight of history. Clara's heart hammered in her chest, but fear was not all she felt. There was wonder, too. The canyon glowed with late afternoon light, the rock faces shifting through shades of crimson and gold. Far below, a thin stream wound like silver ribbon through the stone. The land was fierce, but it was beautiful. She could almost understand why someone would fight to the death to protect it. They reached a plateau where the air smelled faintly of smoke and sage. Below, nestled in a hollow of cliffs, lay the Apache village. Tents of tanned hide stood in neat rows. Children played near a ring of fire. Women pounded grain in wooden mortars. When the group approached, work stopped. Dozens of eyes turned toward the pale-skinned stranger walking among them. Clara swallowed hard but kept her chin high. She reminded herself that she had chosen this path, that she had come for truth, not comfort. Still, when she met the unflinching gaze of the villagers, she felt every mile that separated her from Boston's brick streets and polite society. Kohan stepped forward, raising his hand. The murmuring quieted instantly. Even without understanding the words, Clara felt his authority ripple through the air. This was not merely a man. This was a leader, born from the same fire that forged the land around him. He turned to her then. "You will wait," he said simply. He spoke to one of the women, who approached Clara with cautious eyes and motioned for her to sit near a stone circle. Clara obeyed, clutching her hands together to still their trembling. For a while, Kohan spoke with the elders by the fire. Their voices rose and fell like the wind, rhythmic and measured. Clara caught her name, Bennett, and the word camera repeated several times. One of the younger warriors mimicked the act of taking a picture. The elders frowned. The word for spirit drifted through the air, soft but sharp. When Kohan finally turned back to her, the setting sun had thrown his face half into shadow. He walked toward her slowly, each step measured. When he stopped before her, the world seemed to still. "Why are you here?" he asked. Clara lifted her gaze. "To tell the truth," she said. "To show people what is real." "Your people think they know what is real," he said. "They see with their mouths, not their eyes." She hesitated, searching his face. There was anger there, yes, but behind it, something else. Weariness, pride, the quiet ache of a man who had seen too much taken from his world. "Then let me see with my eyes," she said softly. He studied her in silence, and for the first time since she'd been captured, Clara didn't feel small. His gaze held hers with such intensity that the air between them seemed to hum. Time thinned. The crackle of the fire, the murmur of voices, even the whisper of the desert breeze all faded away. It was just them. A woman who had come searching for truth, and a man who had spent his life defending it. Neither spoke. Neither needed to. In that moment, Clara realized that he wasn't just deciding her fate. He was seeing her, measuring her spirit against his own. Whatever he found there, it made him pause. For the first time, the great Kohan, the desert ghost, seemed uncertain. Then, just as quickly, the spell broke. He stepped back, his voice quiet but firm. "You will stay tonight," he said. "Tomorrow we decide what to do with you." Clara nodded, her throat dry. As he turned away, she exhaled shakily, realizing she'd been holding her breath. The wind rose again, stirring the firelight and carrying the scent of smoke and cedar. And though no one else seemed to notice, Clara swore she heard the desert itself sigh, as if the land, too, had witnessed what had just passed between them. It was not love. Not yet, but it was something the wind would remember. Dawn came softly, filtering through the canyon walls in bands of rose and gold. The Apache camp stirred to life before the sun fully rose. Fires rekindled, smoke rising in thin blue spirals, children's laughter breaking the hush of morning. Clara woke beneath a woven blanket that smelled faintly of sage and smoke. Someone had left it for her in the night. The gesture confused her. It was too kind for a prisoner, too cautious for a guest. She sat up slowly, her body aching from the stone ground, and looked around. The village moved with a rhythm she didn't recognize. Men sharpened blades or tended horses tethered near the stream. Women carried water in clay pots, their movements graceful, practiced. A group of children trailed behind one woman, giggling, one of them bold enough to stare at Clara openly before being shushed away. She smiled faintly. Children always saw truth before adults decided what to fear. Kohan appeared then, emerging from the morning haze as though he had been carved from it. He wore his hair loose now, falling over his shoulders. A beaded necklace rested against his chest, and sunlight caught in the small scars that crossed his arms, evidence of the battles that had made him legend. He didn't greet her, only studied her the way one might study a storm cloud, assessing what it might bring. "You slept," he said finally, his tone neither warm nor cold. "Enough," Clara replied, brushing dust from her skirt. "No one tied me. Should I take that as a sign of trust or carelessness?" A flicker of a smile ghosted across his lips, gone almost before she saw it. "Neither," he said. "It means no one here fears you, yet." Clara arched a brow. "Should they?" He didn't answer. Instead, he nodded toward her camera, which one of the warriors set carefully at her feet. "Show me," he said. "Show me how your machine steals light." She hesitated. "It doesn't steal. It remembers. That's all a photograph is, a memory caught before it fades." "Memories belong to the living," he said. "The land remembers in its own way. It does not need your glass to do it." But his curiosity betrayed him. Clara could see it in the way his gaze lingered on the brass fittings, the black bellows, the strange mechanical beauty of it. So she set up the camera slowly, deliberately, explaining each motion as she went. The warriors gathered, whispering. When she placed the glass plate inside, Kohan crouched beside her, the earth pressing against his knees. "Now look," she said, pulling the dark cloth over both their heads. Their faces were inches apart, shadows mingling. He peered through the lens, and for a moment, the warrior who ruled the desert looked like a boy seeing the stars for the first time. The image appeared upside down, one of the children across the clearing, chasing a puppy through the dust. Kohan's breath caught softly. "It's backwards. Everything is," Clara whispered, "until you learn how to see." When they emerged from beneath the cloth, the onlookers had fallen silent. Something had changed, something delicate and dangerous. Kohan stood, his expression unreadable, then gestured for her to follow. He led her through the camp, showing her the cornfields tucked between the rocks, the small shrine marked by eagle feathers, the cold spring that bubbled clear as glass. Everywhere they went, she saw the same thing: resilience carved from hardship. "Your people think we are ghosts," he said as they walked. "But ghosts don't plant seeds. We bleed. We bury our children. We laugh." Clara's voice softened. "Then let me show them that. Let me tell your story the way it deserves to be told." He stopped, turning toward her fully. "You cannot tell what you do not understand." "Then teach me," she said quietly. For a long moment, the only sound was the wind sighing through the canyon grass. Kohan's eyes held hers, unreadable, until finally he said, "We will see." That night, when the fires burned low and the stars wheeled overhead, Clara realized she had crossed an invisible line. She was still not free, but she was no longer just a prisoner. The land, the people, even Kohan himself had begun to let her in. And in her heart, a strange truth took root. She didn't want to leave. By the end of her third day in the Apache camp, Clara Bennett had stopped feeling like an intruder and started feeling like a witness. The days unfolded in rhythm with the sun. Meals shared around the fire, children laughing as they practiced archery, the steady hum of a life she'd never imagined back in Boston. She kept her camera close, but she didn't touch it without permission. Each time she lifted it, she asked, sometimes with words, sometimes with only a look, and waited until a nod was given. To her surprise, the people began to relax around her. The women, curious about her clothes and her strange, soft hands, showed her how to grind corn between flat stones until her palms blistered. The children, who had first watched her with wide, wary eyes, now followed her in small packs, fascinated by her accent, her pale skin, the glint of the glass lens she carried like a treasure. Kohan watched all of this from a distance. He rarely spoke, but Clara felt his presence everywhere. The weight of his gaze as she worked, the quiet shadow he cast whenever he walked past. He was a man made of contradictions, fierce in command yet gentle with the smallest child, silent in counsel, yet capable of words that cut like a blade when he chose to use them. She told herself it was only admiration, respect for a man defending what was his. But at night, when the campfire flickered low and the desert stars stretched endless above, she caught herself wondering about the man behind the legend. The one who carried loss in his eyes but never let it show. That evening, as the tribe prepared for a small harvest celebration, Clara sat near the fire polishing her camera lens. The air smelled of roasted corn and wood smoke. Music drifted through the camp, drums low and steady echoing the heartbeat of the land itself. An elder approached her, his face weathered and calm. "You are different," he said in halting English. "You do not fear what you do not know." Clara smiled. "I fear plenty," she admitted. "I just don't let it stop me." The old man's eyes twinkled. "That is why Kohan allows you to stay." She looked up sharply. "He hasn't said that. He doesn't need to." The elder's voice softened. "Our chief listens to the wind, but he looks at you." Before Clara could answer, movement caught her eye. Kohan approached, his steps measured, the flickering firelight tracing the lines of his face. The camp quieted as he passed, a sign of the respect he commanded. He stopped before her, gaze fixed on the camera. "You have taken many pictures," he said. "Only with permission," she replied. He nodded slowly. "My people trust you. That is rare." Clara hesitated, sensing something beneath his words. "And you? Do you trust me?" Kohan's eyes lifted to meet hers. The fire reflected in them, molten and unreadable. "I do not trust easily," he said. "But I believe the land brought you here for a reason." Before she could reply, a sudden shout echoed from the far side of the camp. 2 scouts had returned, their horses lathered with sweat. Their words came fast, urgent. And though Clara couldn't understand the Apache, she recognized the fear in their tone. Kohan's jaw tightened. He turned to her. "Soldiers. They come from the south." "Looking for you." The words hit her like a blow. "For me?" He nodded once. "They think we hold you against your will." Clara's pulse quickened. "Then tell them the truth. Tell them I'm here by choice." Kohan's gaze hardened. "They will not listen. They do not come for truth. They come for war." Silence settled between them, heavy and electric. Around them, the camp began to move. women gathering children, men readying weapons, the rhythm of peace breaking into the thrum of defense. Clara rose to her feet, meeting Kohan's gaze with defiant steadiness. Then I'll tell them myself. He stepped closer, his voice low but fierce. If you go to them, they will use you. If you stay, you will be marked as one of us. The fire crackled between them, casting long shadows that tangled at their feet. Clara didn't flinch. Then let them mark me. For the first time, Kohan's composure broke. The faintest smile, pride, disbelief, maybe even admiration crossed his lips. You are a woman unafraid, he said softly. That is both your strength and your danger. She met his gaze, her heart pounding. So are you. And for the briefest moment, the space between them wasn't divided by fear or by tribe, but by something raw and real. The understanding that courage, in any language, sounded the same. The morning air carried a metallic edge, the scent of dust and anticipation thick enough to taste. Clara Bennett had risen early, hoping to capture the canyon in the quiet gold of sunrise. Instead, the valley erupted in movement. The scouts returned, faces taut and pale. Soldiers, heavily armed and mounted on black horses, rode through the mouth of the canyon, their polished rifles catching the early light. The thunder of hooves against stone echoed across the cliffs, a declaration of intrusion that made Clara's stomach twist. She froze. This was not the controlled chaos she had seen in towns or trading posts. This was different. These were men who believed the land and everyone on it was theirs to claim. Kohan emerged from the village, moving like a shadow across the plateau. His warriors flanked him, bows strung, arrows nocked, eyes sharp and unyielding. The desert ghost, the name whispered in fear across the frontier, stood fully visible, his presence radiating authority that seemed to make even the canyon itself lean closer. Clara's heart pounded. They're here for me, she whispered to herself. They are here for what you represent, Kohan said calmly, his voice cutting through the tension. Your people do not understand the land. They cannot see its truth. They will not leave until they believe they have taken it. Clara's hands trembled, but she raised her chin. Then I'll make them understand. Kohan's gaze, dark and intense, held hers for a long moment. Understand or die, he asked. There was no humor in his tone. You taught me courage, she said. I'll use it. The soldiers reached the base of the plateau, halting only when the first of Kohan's warriors stepped forward. The air between the two sides crackled, taut as a drawn bowstring. Clara knew reasoning with these men would be impossible. They came with orders, not questions, with pride, not understanding. She stepped forward, raising her hands. I'm here by choice, she called to the soldiers, her voice steady despite the hammering of her heart. You have no right to take me from this land. This is not just their home, it's theirs, and they will not abandon it for your fear or greed. The captain, a burly man with a scar running down his cheek, sneered. We're bringing you home, Miss Bennett. That's an order. Kohan's eyes narrowed. He spoke in Apache and the words fell like thunder. His warriors shifted, arrows at the ready. The tension was unbearable. A single spark could ignite a massacre. Clara's pulse raced. She had expected fear, but she felt something else now. Clarity. She had seen the people of this canyon, their laughter, their resilience, their hearts laid bare through the eyes of her camera. She could not betray that. Not for any medal, any accolade, any rescue. She turned to Kohan. I won't leave. The desert ghost didn't move. Instead, he studied her, as though weighing the weight of her choice against the lives of everyone in the valley. Finally, he nodded once, then he raised his hand. His voice, low and commanding, rang out over the canyon. They will not pass. The soldiers hesitated. Kohan's warriors moved with silent precision, forming a line that turned the plateau into an impenetrable barrier. Clara realized in a rush of fear and awe that these men and women could and would fight to protect their home. A tense standoff stretched across the valley. Dust rose from hooves and footsteps, and the canyon seemed to hold its breath. Clara felt herself trembling, not from fear, but from the gravity of the choice she had made. She was no longer a visitor. She was no longer an outsider. She was part of something bigger than herself, something that demanded courage, truth, and loyalty. And as the wind whipped through the canyon, carrying the scent of sage, dust, and gunpowder, Clara knew the world she had left behind, the neat streets of Boston, the polite faces, the expectations of society, was gone. For better or worse, she belonged here now, Kohan's gaze found hers once more, sharp and unreadable. There was no need for words. The standoff, the danger, the impossibility of her choice, they were all shared between them. And in that silence, unbroken even by the soldiers' shouts, something deeper passed. A recognition that the world could be divided by nations and fear, but courage and loyalty would always bridge the impossible. The first shots hadn't been fired yet, but Clara understood that war had come, in every sense, between the worlds she now straddled. Night fell suddenly over the canyon, dragging shadows across the red cliffs like ink spilling across parchment. The soldiers, still gathered at the base of the plateau, made camp, their torches flickering weakly against the deep darkness of the desert. Clara Bennett sat near the fire in the Apache village, her camera packed away, her hands clenching in silent frustration. She had expected fear, and yet sitting here among Kohan's people, her fear had shifted into something sharper, determination. She could not leave. She could not betray what she had seen and learned. But she had underestimated how close danger could come or how deeply it could bind her to the man who had claimed her attention long before she understood it. The first gunshot shattered the night like a crack of thunder. A soldier's horse screamed and chaos erupted instantly. The Apache warriors moved with practiced speed, forming a protective circle around the village. Smoke from torches and fires mingled with dust kicked up by the fleeing horses, turning the canyon floor into a storm of orange and gray. "Stay inside," Kohan barked, his voice carrying over the din. But Clara, her heart hammering, could not remain passive. She sprinted toward the outer perimeter, camera left behind, eyes scanning for the first sign of soldiers. One of them emerged from the dust, rifle raised, aiming at a group of children who had taken cover near a rock formation. Clara didn't think. She lunged, pulling a boy behind her and rolling him to safety. A bullet tore a cloud of sand where she had just stood. Kohan was there in an instant. He struck the soldier's arm with the flat of his knife, twisting him off balance, then slammed him into the ground. Another warrior disarmed the second soldier, moving with the precision of trained hunters. Clara's chest heaved as adrenaline surged through her. I'm sorry," she gasped, fear and resolve mingling in her voice. He glanced at her, amber eyes glowing in the firelight. "You risk your life for them?" "For them," she corrected. "And for the truth." He didn't argue. Instead, he grabbed her hand, yanking her behind a boulder as more soldiers approached from the canyon's mouth. "You do not fight like a frightened woman," he said, his tone almost a whisper. Yet it carried across the dust and noise. "You don't know what I am capable of," she shot back. "Breathless, I think I do," he said, the barest edge of a smile tugging at his lips. "And it scares me." The night became a blur of fire, dust, and motion. Clara found herself moving in tandem with Kohan and the warriors, ducking behind rocks, blocking shots, and helping to guide the non-combatants, children, elders, and women, toward safer ground. Each time she glanced at him, he was there, a shadow, a guardian, a man who seemed to anticipate danger before it arrived. At one point, a soldier broke through the defensive line, aiming directly at Clara. She froze, heart hammering, only for Kohan to appear in a blur, knocking the rifle aside and tackling the man into the sand. They landed together, bodies twisting, and Clara felt something in that instant, a pulse, a life force, a tether that had nothing to do with words. When the chaos subsided and the last soldier fled, leaving smoke and echoes behind, Clara sank to the ground, trembling. Dirt and sweat streaked across her face. Kohan knelt beside her, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder. Not just as a protector, but as something more intimate, more binding than she had dared to hope. "You are alive," he said simply. "I am," she whispered. "Because of you and because I refused to run." He studied her, eyes lingering on hers in the flickering firelight. For a moment, the canyon seemed to hold its breath again. Then slowly, almost reluctantly, he said, "The land, the people, and now you are part of this world whether you like it or not." Clara exhaled, the tension in her body finally easing, though the thrill of danger still hummed through her veins. "I think I like it," she admitted. He didn't answer with words. He only looked at her, amber eyes unreadable yet alive with unspoken acknowledgement. In that gaze, Clara felt a promise, not of comfort, but of connection, trust, and the storm of something inevitable. The night of fire and dust passed, leaving scorched earth, scattered embers, and a bond forged in chaos and courage. In the quiet aftermath, Clara realized that the desert, The warriors and Kohan himself had changed her in ways she could not yet name, but she knew she would never be the same again. The morning after the battle, the canyon lay quiet, almost reverent. Smoke from last night's fires curled into the pale dawn, and the desert stretched endlessly under a pale, warming sun. Clara Bennett walked through the village, her hands idle for the first time in days, the adrenaline of survival ebbing into a quiet ache. The soldiers had retreated, leaving the Apache to tend their wounded, rebuild the minor damages, and grieve the fear that had passed over them like a shadow. But for Clara, no wound was as pressing as the one inside her own heart. She had survived. She had witnessed courage, loyalty, and defiance, and now she had a choice that would define the rest of her life. Kohan appeared at the edge of the fire circle, moving with the same quiet authority that had defined him since the first morning she met him. He watched her, eyes steady and unreadable. For the first time, Clara realized how much he had come to mean to her, not just as a protector or a leader, but as a man whose presence had reshaped her understanding of strength, honor, and belonging. "You've made your choice," he said softly. Clara turned to face him. "Have I?" "You may return east," he continued. "To Boston, to your life. They will welcome you. You could be celebrated for the courage you've shown." "And yet?" she asked, sensing the unspoken words between them. "And yet," Kohan said, stepping closer, "your heart is not there. It has never been there. It belongs here, with this land, with these people." Clara swallowed, the words echoing truths she had known but avoided. She thought of the children laughing, the women preparing food, the elders teaching the young. She thought of the sunsets over the canyon cliffs, the way the light struck the land like molten gold. And she thought of Kohan, silent, commanding, fearless, and the strange, unspoken tether between them. "I came to tell the truth," she whispered. "But the truth has changed me." Kohan's gaze softened, though only slightly. "And you have changed it too. Your presence here has left a mark, on us, on me, on the land itself." Clara took a deep breath. She could feel the weight of the decision pressing against her chest like a stone. To return east would mean safety, recognition, the comfort of her old life. To stay meant danger, isolation, and the unknown. And yet, for the first time in her life, she understood that belonging, true belonging, was not measured by comfort, but by the courage to face what mattered most. "I will stay," she said finally, her voice firm. "Not because I am fearless, not because it is safe, but because it is right." Kohan studied her, amber eyes unreadable yet filled with quiet approval. He reached out, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. "Then you are mine," he said simply, not as a claim of ownership, but as acknowledgement, of trust, of connection, of shared fate. Clara's lips curved in a small, weary smile. "And you are mine," she replied. The canyon wind swept over them, lifting the dust in the heat of the night before. Somewhere far off, a coyote's cry echoed, a reminder of the wildness surrounding them. But for the first time, Clara did not feel fear. She felt choice, and in that choice, freedom. She had left one world behind, yes, but in the desert, among people who lived and breathed honor, and beside a man who embodied it, she had found the world she was meant for. Kohan stepped closer, his hand brushing hers, and for a moment, nothing else existed but the vast, eternal canyon and the heartbeat of a life they would build together. The decision had been made. The desert had claimed her, not in chains, but in truth, courage, and love. And Clara Bennett knew she would never walk away. Years had passed since the day Clara Bennett chose the desert over Boston, and the Apache lands had changed, as all lands do, under the weight of history. But some things remained: the cliffs, the red mesas, the endless sky, and one story that refused to be forgotten. Clara walked along the canyon ridge, her hair streaked with silver, her hands steady as ever. Beside her, Kohan moved with the same grace and authority that had first drawn her gaze so many years before. The wind carried the scent of sage and dust, the voices of children playing far below, the distant cry of a hawk circling overhead. This was their home, and theirs it had always been. The villagers watched from below as the couple walked together. To the new generation, Clara's presence was as natural as the sun warming the red cliffs. They had grown up with her laughter, her soft voice, and the steady click of her camera shutter. which she still used to capture moments of life in the canyon, the light, the land, the people. Stories of the desert ghost and the woman who followed him spread quietly across the frontier. Settlers who ventured near whispered of the white woman who lived among the Apache, a woman fearless enough to walk with warriors and gentle enough to sit with children. Soldiers who had once hunted Kohan spoke in low tones of the girl from Boston who had tamed fear itself. Clara had long since stopped counting the miles she had left behind. She no longer longed for cobblestone streets or the orderly quiet of eastern parlors. The desert had taught her more than any school could. Courage, patience, resilience, and a love that defied boundaries and expectations. Kohan, now older yet still imposing, watched her from the edge of the plateau. His eyes, amber and deep, reflected the memory of every moment they had shared. The standoff at the canyon's mouth, the night of fire and dust, the quiet mornings beside the river. In all those moments he had seen Clara not as an outsider, but as someone who could stand beside him, shoulder to shoulder, heart to heart. "Are you ever tempted to leave?" he asked, voice low, almost teasing. Clara glanced at him, the corners of her lips lifting in a faint smile. "Sometimes, yes, but the canyon always calls me back. And so do you." He nodded once, silently acknowledging the truth between them. No words could capture the depth of what they shared, not their struggles, their dangers, or the love that had grown from fire, dust, and courage. In the evenings, Clara continued her photography, capturing the life around her, the elders teaching, children laughing, warriors training, the sky bleeding color across the mesas. She never sold the photographs, never sent them east. They were a testament not to herself, but to the people she had come to honor, and to the man who had claimed her heart with a single look. Travelers sometimes came, seeking stories of the Apache and the desert ghost. Clara would tell them, carefully weaving fact and respect together, never revealing the full power of the bond between them. Kohan rarely spoke in these moments. His silence was the anchor that reminded everyone that legends, like deserts, are shaped by both what is revealed and what remains untouchable. Years later, when travelers looked back across the canyon, they would speak of the white woman who walked with the Apache and the warrior who ruled the land. They would speak of courage, love, and loyalty. And though the world beyond the cliffs might never fully understand it, the desert remembered, and it remembered Clara Bennett. She had arrived a stranger, seeking truth. She had stayed, and in doing so became a legend, and Kohan, who had ruled the land and the hearts of his people, had quietly claimed her, not with force, but with a look that had seen her entire soul. The wind swept through the canyon, carrying the echo of that first meeting, and the promise that some stories are eternal, etched in land, in memory, and in the heart of those brave enough to live them. The legend of Clara Bennett and Kohan, the desert ghost, would endure. As long as the red cliffs stood and the wind whispered across the mesas, their story would remain. And somewhere deep in the canyon, the land smiled.